speak and to share this event this afternoon. And I'm very glad to be able to be here, and not least to be inspired and encouraged by what's been said and what's been done already. One thing that's come out from everyone who's spoken this afternoon is something I wanted to underline quite strongly. And that's what you might call the question of scale. Some people would say, if you can't solve everything, it's not worth trying to solve anything. But what we've been told is the worthwhileness simply of doing what we can, what's to hand, what's immediately within our capacity to make a difference about it. That's why there is really no substitute for hearing first-hand stories such as we've heard from Farage and Isha this afternoon. We've heard something about how the realities we speak about in general terms impact on actual lives. And we know when we hear those stories, we can make some measurable, real human difference there. And it all begins with that. It begins with that confidence that it's possible to make a difference, however small. But let's step back for a moment and think about a subject which I guess has been in lots of people's minds for the last 3 years, and that's Brexit. Now, you may have noticed that when the legislation was going through Parliament a few weeks ago, there was one little glitch which the House of Lords picked up. Some years ago, the so-called Dubs Amendment, the legislation pushed by Lord Dubs himself, somebody who had been part of the Kinder transport, the movement in the 30s that welcomed children from Nazi Germany. Lord Dubs pressed for an amendment to the law which would allow unaccompanied young people, children and young people, who had the legal right to be reunited with family in the UK, allowing them to come. Some of us were involved a bit in campaigning about that, writing about it, speaking about it, and various other kinds of activities. And rather miraculously, that amendment got through. Now, many of you will be aware that the implementing of that was something of a shambles. That after a number of years, the number of children and young people who had come into this country on that basis was in the hundreds rather than thousands, the thousands of those who were actually entitled to take that up. We have, as a country, responded very poorly to that challenge. But the first draft of the Brexit legislation more or less ironed out that capacity, that right. The Lords amended the legislation, sent it back to the Commons, who rejected the amendment. In other words, the issue about the security of children and young people who are without land, without security, often without immediate human nurture in a family, their future remains something to be concerned about. And this country, which in the past once or twice has stepped up to the plate and done the right thing, as with the Kinder transport in the 1930s, this country, through its government, has yet to step up to the plate this time round. So at the moment we still have the situation where in Calais, the crisis continues, and our government continues to pour money into Calais to create an unwelcoming environment there, rather than pouring it into enterprises here in the UK, which would make this a welcoming environment. And why exactly that should be thought to be a good thing escapes me completely. How does that come to be possible? It comes to be possible, I suppose, because governments, to put it very bluntly, do what they can get away with. And the point of a good, well-working democracy is that it gradually reduces the number of things governments can get away with without scrutiny. Years ago, a very senior person in British government talked with me about the Jubilee 2000 campaign, which some of you will remember, quite a while ago now, which was designed to reduce and cancel international debt, unpayable international debt on the part of poorer countries. And this person said, we as a government needed you as activists, as churches, as community groups. We needed you to give us permission to do the right thing. That really stuck with me. Governments need us to give them permission to do the right thing. In other words, the more examples of local, face-to-face building of contact, welcome, constructive engagement, the more stories like the ones we've heard this afternoon, the closer we get to giving permission to our government to do the right thing. Or, to put it a little bit less friendlily, to hold their feet to the fire. Governments of all colours tend to default to the safe position, or what they think is the safe position. The position that involves least change and least challenge. But all around the country, there are groups like this who are working as hard as they can to keep up the pressure. To say, actually, change is not only possible, it's something which goes with the grain of what people on the ground in this country really want. And I love to say to people that one of the great discoveries you make as you go on and meet more groups is that the people of this country are actually a lot more generous than the Daily Mail would like them to be. So, keeping up that pressure, giving permission, if you like, in the positive sense, holding feet to the fire in the not so positive sense, it starts here. It starts with the local, it starts with the face-to-face. But let's connect that again with some of the local work we've been hearing about through the various homeless projects in this city, not least the church's project. Some of you may remember that a little bit over a year ago, we held a citywide seminar which involved businesses, colleges, voluntary bodies, local administrators, local government figures, and also homeless people themselves, or people who had experienced homelessness, for a few hours of brainstorming. Because we thought, some of us, that if we got all those people together, there was a pool of imagination and skill there which ought to be able to make a difference. As somebody said, if a place like Cambridge can't come up with some bright ideas about homelessness, where can? And hence the title, not only for that event, but for the ongoing foundation which has taken the work forward, was It Takes a City. It takes a city to address the problem of homelessness. It takes a city to address the welcome of refugees and asylum seekers and others. It takes a whole community. But that begins with the face-to-face acknowledgement. It begins with hearing the actual flesh and blood stories. And who knows where it ends? But it won't start if it doesn't start there. It takes a city to address homelessness, and in one sense you could say it takes a whole national community to address the question of refugees and asylum seekers, displaced persons. It takes the kind of imagination that we share throughout this society. It takes a passion and a conviction and a commitment to pushing back against the myths, the slanders, the unbelievable distortions that come through bits of the media and embed themselves in people's minds. I've got a shrewd suspicion that if you asked people how many under 18 refugees we've received in this country in the last few years, people would probably say, oh, hundreds of thousands, rather than 400 odd. If you ask people how much of our national budget goes on international aid, you'll still find people who say, oh, 20%, as opposed to the 0.7% of GDP that we're committed to legally. These myths lead people to panic. And if there's one thing which we can look to do at the local level with these face-to-face connections, it's to say to one another and to say to our society and our city, don't panic. We can cope if we have the basic decency, the basic generosity, the basic imagination to listen to what's being said to us and identify where we can actually make measurable difference. Really, I think that's where it all joins up, the various stories, the various challenges that we're thinking about this afternoon. We try to find the difference we can actually make. It'd be nice to change everything, but no one of us is going to do that. Start with what we can do. Move out from what we can do as individuals to that whole level of engagement where we're challenging the falsehoods and the fears that surround us. Because we can do that as well. When we hear in conversation various things, when we read, we can push back, and so we should. But perhaps above all, we mustn't lose sight of the actual stories that are before us. How this impinges on people who are not statistics, who are not abstract individuals, but whose lives are literally immeasurably precious. I say that as a person of Christian faith because I believe those lives are immeasurably precious in the eyes of God. Whether or not you share that religious commitment, you can still say these lives are immeasurably precious to me. If I don't believe in God, well, maybe I should step in and do the God thing myself and just act as if these lives were precious in that way. And we can all do that. We can all make that decision. We can all make that difference. If we make it, if we demonstrate the generosity, the welcome that Shoshana has talked about, if we can show that a city like this can think together and feel together about this problem, we can begin to get truth just a little bit more into public circulation. The truth of the dignity, the need of the people we're speaking about, landless or homeless, the truth of their value, their preciousness, the truth that our own hearts have the capacity to be touched and opened to make a change, the truth that the default setting for our city or our society does not have to be defensiveness, fear, and anxiety. And together, we can transform this. Together, we can give permission to those in authority and power in our society. Together, we can keep up that pressure towards a justice, a warmth and a welcome that has seemed so often to be in short supply in recent years. But we're here because we don't believe it's in short supply. We believe it's there for us to tap into, it's there for us to share and to show. And the delight of being with you this afternoon is to know that commitment, that warmth and that welcome exists here, and that there is a willingness to make it real more broadly. So thank you once again for the invitation to be here. Thank you for all that you all do. Thank you for the witness, the powerful stories we've heard. And, well, we commit the future to whatever power of justice, mercy, and love sustains us